Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first episode of Too Long Didn't Read, a series where we will be discussing some great books, chapter by chapter, for people who don't like reading. The first series we're going to cover is A Song of Ice and Fire, one of my all-time favorite book series. And this very first episode will be all about the prologue of the first book, A Game of Thrones. So let's get right into it. To discuss what happens in the first chapter, I first have to take you on a little lore dive to understand the context of what's happening. So, let's start by discussing the wall. All the way in the north of the continent, there is a massive wall made from ice. It is over 700 feet high and 300 miles long. It completely separates the Seven Kingdoms to the south from the lands beyond the wall in the north. It was made ages ago to defend the Seven Kingdoms from everything that lives north of the wall. And we have a map here that shows the main continent of the book series, Westeros. Now, I love bringing up maps, so I'm going to do that a lot in these videos so we can keep track of where everything is happening. And if we zoom into the north, we can see where the wall is located and how it spans the entire continent from one coastline all the way to the other. Now, the wall is guarded by the Night's Watch, the sworn brothers of the Night's Watch, a group of men who've dedicated their entire life to defending the Seven Kingdoms. And so they live in castles built along the south side of this wall. Now we're going to learn so much more about the Night's Watch and the wall and who they are and what they do in later chapters. But for now, this is all you will need to know. Now, the reason I explained all this is because our main characters in this chapter are three rangers from the Night's Watch. Let's start by discussing our first one, Will. Now, Will is the POV character, meaning we experience the entire chapter through his eyes. He's been in the Night's Watch for about 4 years, and been on hundreds of ranging, so he's quite good. He's also known for being able to sneak through the woods very well. He's very good at sneaking, he's very quiet. Now, we know that he used to be a poacher, and he was caught by the Malisters, a house in Westeros, skinning one of their animals. And so the Malisters caught him, and he got to choose between losing a hand or putting on the black and being sent to the wall. And so obviously Will chose to be sent to the wall and to become part of the Night's Watch. Now the second character we meet is Garrett. Garrett is quite old, he's past 50, and he's been in the Night's Watch for over 40 years, so he's been there almost his entire life. He's very well respected by everyone, he's very knowledgeable of the North and how things work beyond the wall. Interesting is also that he's lost 2 ears, 3 toes, and a finger to the cold, just to show how long he's been there and how harsh the environment is that he's lived in his entire life. And then the third character we find is Waymar Royce. He's the youngest son of House Royce, meaning he was born in nobility. He's only 18 years old, so he's quite young, and he's considered pretty handsome. He's already been knighted at this young age. As you can see, he's named Sir Waymar Royce. And you can see he has a noble background because he has much better equipment. He has better clothing, a better horse, he has a thick cloak, he has a new castle-forged sword that even has jewels in it, things that other people in the Night's Watch wouldn't even dream of. But at the same time, we see in this chapter that he's terribly unprepared, because all of these things, like the cloak and the sword, they just end up getting in the way. They end up making him clumsy and noisy and completely undermining him. He's only been in the Night's Watch for less than half a year, so he's very new to all of this, and this is actually his first time he's going beyond the wall. Now, strangely, he has been put in charge of this mission because of his noble standing, most likely, even though he's the least experienced and the least knowledgeable of these three characters, and that is obviously going to cause some conflict. Now, we know these characters have been out past the wall, in the haunted forest, for about 8 or 9 days they've been traveling, and they've been hunting down a group of men known as wildlings. Now, wildlings are people who live north of the wall, essentially. They're called wildlings because they don't live according to the laws and the structure of the Seven Kingdoms that people in the south do. They have savage ways, and they're known to try and cross the wall to raid the lands beyond it, stealing supplies and food and killing anyone that gets in their way. And so these 3 men have been tasked to track a specific group of them, to try and find out where they're hiding. Now we also learn that the order was given by Lord Commander Mormont, and we get a name drop of Maester Aemon as the person who amputated Garrett's ears in the past. Now these are very small mentions for these two characters, but they're actually going to end up playing big roles, so I wanted to show them off already when they get mentioned in this very first chapter. But we will learn much more about them in the future. So, Will explains that he saw these wildlings dead. He's just returned to Waymore, Royce, and Garrett from scouting. And so Will and Garrett want to return home because they found the wildlings, they're dead, mission complete. But Waymore doesn't believe this. He wants to see this for himself. His reputation is on the line after all. Now, Waymore even starts to mock his companions for being scared and for trying to run away. Both Will and Garrett note how things feel different this time on this ranging. Will even says that he feels as though something is watching him. Something cold that did not love him. Now Waymore asks Will to explain what it is exactly that he saw again. And Will says that he got as close as he dared. There's 8 of them, men and women both. No children I could see. No fire burning, but the fire pit was still plain as day. No one moving. I watched a long time. No living man ever lay so still. After Waymore's questioning, Will realizes that there was no blood on the site. And so Waymore suggests that they could have been sleeping, meaning they would still be alive. Now Garrett says with some certainty that it was the cold who killed them. He has the knowledge to know this, of course. No one knows the cold better than Garrett. He explains how he experienced the cold firsthand. At first you shiver, and your teeth chatter, and you stamp your feet and dream of mulled wine and nice hot fires. It burns, it does. Nothing burns like the cold, but only for a while. Then it gets inside you and starts to fill you up, and after a while you don't have the strength to fight it. It's easier just to sit down or go to sleep. They say you don't feel any pain towards the end. First you go weak and drowsy, and everything starts to fade. And then it's like sinking into a sea of warm milk. Peaceful, like. Waymore immediately refutes this, however, by saying that the wall was weeping, meaning the ice from the wall was melting, kind of, and the water is dribbling down the wall, meaning that it wouldn't have been cold enough to freeze to death, especially not for wildlings who were used to living in these circumstances. So, Waymore says he's not going home, and he wants Will to lead them to the place where he found the wildlings. And so these 3 characters travel through the woods at night, and when they arrive, again, Garrett notes that something feels off, something strange. He feels afraid. Will notes that they should move the rest of the way on foot, as they're getting quite close now. And Garrett suggests they should make a fire, to which Waymore responds, "How big a fool are you, old man? If there are enemies in this wood, a fire is the last thing we want." "There are some enemies a fire will keep away," Garrett said. "Bears and direwolves and other things." So Waymore's mouth became a hard line. No fire. Will shows Waymore where he found the wildlings, as Garrett stays behind to guard the horses. But when they get to the place where Will saw the wildlings, he's completely shocked. His heart stopped in his chest. For a moment he dared not breathe. They were gone. All the bodies were gone. "Your dead men seem to have moved camp, Will," Waymore said. Will notices a double-bladed battle axe that was left behind, in perfect condition. But why would they leave that behind? Waymore refuses to go back to the wall empty-handed, and he tells Will to get in a tree and look for a nearby fire to see if they can find the wildlings after all. As Will's climbing up the tree, Waymore suddenly shouts out, "Who goes there?" Will stops climbing and watches down. Will saw movement from the corner of his eye, pale shapes gliding through the wood. He turned his head, glimpsed a white shadow in the darkness. Then it was gone. Branches stirred gently in the wind, scratching at one another with wooden fingers. Will opened his mouth to call down a warning, and the words seemed to freeze in his throat. Perhaps he was wrong. Perhaps it had only been a bird, a reflection on the snow, some trick of the moonlight. What had he seen, after all? Then a shadow emerged from the dark of the wood. It stood in front of Royce. Tall, it was, and gaunt, and hard as old bones, with flesh pale as milk. Its armor seemed to change color as it moved. Here it was white as new-fallen snow, and there black as shadow. Everywhere dappled with the deep grey-green of the trees. The patterns ran like moonlight on water with every step it took. Waymar tells it to come no further as he prepares to fight. The other pulls out a sword that seems to be alive with moonlight and made from crystal. Waymar tells it to dance with him, again showing that Waymar has not experienced the harshness of the world. He doesn't know the real grit and darkness of battle, but can only describe it as a dance. However, in that moment, Will finds some respect for his commander as he faces this threat head-on. As Waymar clashes with the creature, others like him start to surround them. 3, 4, 5 of them. Waymar's blade turns white with frost from the cold. The clashing of their swords made an eerie sound, a high, thin song at the edge of hearing, like an animal screaming in pain. Then, Royce's parry came a beat too late. The pale sword bit through the ringmail beneath his arm. The young lord cried out in pain. The others start talking to each other, in a voice that sounded like cracking of ice on a winter lake. Waymar finds his last strength and shouts, "For Robert!" as he gets up. He swings his sword towards the others, and when their blades touch, Waymar's sword simply shatters into a rain of needles. The others all moved forward and repeatedly stabbed Sir Waymar, a cold butchery, their swords cutting through ringmail as if it were silk. When Will finds the courage to look again, the others are gone. After some time, he decides to climb down. Royce's body lay face down in the snow, one arm outflung. The thick sable cloak had been slashed in a dozen places. Lying dead like that, you saw how young he was. A boy. Will finds Sir Waymar's sword, and it looks like a tree that has been struck by lightning. Picks it up, hoping it would be some proof when he tells Garrett or the Lord Commander at the Night's Watch. Will wonders if Garrett was still waiting with the horses, and hurries towards him. But as Will rose, Sir Waymar Royce stood over him. His fine clothes were a tatter, his face a ruin. A shard from his sword transfixed the blind white pupil of his left eye. The right eye was open. The pupil burned blue. It saw. The broken sword fell from nerveless fingers. Will closed his eyes to pray. Long, elegant hands brushed his cheek, then tightened around his throat. They were gloved in the finest moleskin and sticky with blood, yet the touch was icy cold. That is all I wanted to discuss for this chapter. I hope you enjoyed this first episode, and if you're interested in the rest of these books, keep an eye out for future episodes, where we will cover all the other chapters in a similar way. Thank you all for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one. Take care.